Emily Kunstler was one of the luckiest days of my life, because this wouldn't have happened without them. I had what I thought was the job that would be like the penultimate thing of my career when I went to the ACLU. I wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer, and I did that for 34 years as a public defender and then in private practice. And this job at the ACLU came along, and I thought, man, in charge of their criminal legal work and their racial justice work, how could I turn that down? And I loved that job. And I left it for two reasons. Number one, there were other young activists who were in that organization that were ready to take on leadership roles. And one thing I've seen in a whole lot of organizations, and I'm just going to say it because it's been my experience, is that there are people who sometimes found those organizations and do incredible work in those organizations, and they stay too long. There were people in their mid-40s who were waiting for opportunities to leave at the ACLU, and they weren't going to get them while I was sitting there, at least not in my position. So that's one reason I left, because I knew there were people there who were more than ready to replace me. And the other reason I left is to form the Who We Are project, because what I've come to believe is that my lifetime of work in the criminal legal system could culminate with fixing virtually everything about how the criminal legal system works and operates. And we could let virtually everyone out of prison tomorrow. And if we do nothing about racism in this country, we will fill those prisons back up with the exact same people in a very short period of time. And so when George Floyd was killed, many people said, oh my God, we have to do something. We have to pass a law. And I think there was a law that was passed saying you can't kneel on a suspect's neck. And many people felt like that solves the problem. And if you don't know anything about history, then you could assume that that would solve the problem. There was a great Yankee baseball player named Yogi Berra, who was always famous because he said these like crazy things that didn't make a whole lot of sense. And one of his favorite sayings was to say about something, that's like deja vu all over again. Well, George Floyd's murder, to me anyway, was like deja vu all over again. The thing that was unique was a cell phone. Somebody captured it on a video. My entire career as a criminal defense lawyer, I heard my clients tell me the police did this, the police did that, all these stories of brutality. But this is one where we had to look at it for 9 minutes in the middle of a pandemic when everybody was focused on their screens. And so George Floyd's murder and the movement that has come out of that is incredibly important. I am not trying to downplay that at all. I am saying if you think George Floyd is unique, it's because you don't know history. And that's what is so important about understanding history. The reason we have never come up with solutions that work on racial justice is that we always start with, okay, there's racism, so let's fix it. And here are the 3 ways to fix it. And we look back for maybe 2 or 3 years to figure out what's going on, when there is a whole history behind this stuff that explains why America looks like it does today. So last thing I'll say, and then I'll answer a few questions if you have any. This movie will be illegal to show in probably 36 states in America, illegal to show in schools. And the Who We Are project has a lot more coming. This documentary is just the first thing that we're doing. You will see another documentary from the Who We Are project in the first week in October. This is going to be a mini documentary, probably 5 or 6 minutes long, about the presidential election of 1876. And what the documentary is intended to do is to slap people in the face about the importance of voting, because apparently we got some midterm elections coming up in November. I want to stop here and just say that I think this work is important because it's not like this stuff is new. It's not like I discovered anything. This stuff was just sitting there hiding in plain sight. Every single one of us could have gotten this, but I'd ask you to think about it. I'm willing to bet that every single person in this room heard something in this film that you didn't know before. And ask yourself, why didn't you know it? Why wasn't this taught to you? In 1837, John C. Calhoun, one of the most virulent racists in American history, wrote this paper, and he said, we have got to stop letting teachers teach about abolition in schools. Because if these kids get abolition in their heads, slavery is done for. And this country is going to face a war that's going to drench us in blood. That's what he wrote in 1837. And he was absolutely right. Why do you think there is so much furor over what critical race theory and what we're teaching our kids? Because people understand, if you know this history, it's going to impact you. It's going to impact the way you think. It's going to impact you when you come to say, is this enough? Is this solution enough, or do we need to do more? And so I think all these anti-CRT bills, for me, this is just like, it's like a gift. Because one of the things the Who We Are Project is going to do in those states that have anti-CRT laws, we're raising money right now. We want to go into those states, go to the biggest city in those states, get the biggest auditorium in the biggest city, blanket a 4 to 6 county area surrounding that city with our flyers, go to teachers who want this information taught, go to parents, go to student groups, go to community activist groups, and on a Saturday, when it's not in school, invite people to that auditorium, pay Black-owned restaurants to feed everybody in the auditorium, and have national and local speakers talk about the history. And we will advertise it saying, this is what your state legislators are scared to death of you learning. And by the way, if you want some banned books, we're probably going to have those too. So this is an opportunity, as I see it, because the culture war that is raging in America, let's be clear, this is about our creation story. And when you're asking somebody to reject, not really to reject, because there's part of our creation story that is heroic, but when you're asking somebody to incorporate into that creation story really horrific things, that's a big ask. I'm just talking about the way human beings have acted the entire time we've been on this planet. People cling to their creation stories desperately. And so I'm not being Pollyannish and saying there ain't work ahead. There is a lot of work ahead, and I'm scared to death, quite frankly, about where this country may go. But the tipping point that I described on the town hall stage in 2018 is the same tipping point we're at today. Tipping points in a country with a 400-year history of colonial and constitutional existence. Tipping points don't last for a minute or an event or a year. They're a decade, maybe 2 decades. And so this is the struggle that all of us are in, and all of y'all came to law school because there's something about the law, something about where the country is headed that moves you to come here. And that's why I'm thrilled that you're here tonight. Thank you for coming, and thank you for going to law school. But this stuff that we're talking about, it's on us this time. We can't blame our grandparents or our great-grandparents or even our parents. This time, we're the ones who are going to decide where this goes. And so, as I told my class the other day, if you're thinking about not voting, what I would say to you is that the compromise that was made in the election of 1876, watch this video if you don't know that election, because if you think the election in 2000 was weird, Bush versus Gore, or you think Trump versus Biden was weird, you've seen nothing yet until you see what happened in 1876. And there was a deal that was made that stopped Reconstruction. And the deal that they made in 1876 brought on a century of separate but equal and legal racism in this country that we are still trying to dismantle today. So if you are going to have children or grandchildren, or if you have brothers and sisters and you're going to have nieces and nephews, Be prepared to answer them 40 years from now when they look at you and say, did you see this coming? And what did you do about it? I get tired, I get frustrated just like anybody else. But I think of those women that walked in Birmingham in the bus boycott, those women who walked for over a year. And that was part of the movement that allowed me to go to a school that got me a good education. And so what do I say to those women? I'm really tired. I just can't do this anymore. I'm really frustrated. This is really hard. When I think about what they put on their shoulders so that I could be standing here talking to y'all, I am not supposed to be here. If my parents are dead, but if they were alive, they would be laughing their heads off. And they would be saying, we always knew you'd be in the criminal legal system. We just didn't think it would be this way. We thought it would be this other way. But we have a responsibility to the people that came before us and the people that are coming after us. And it's something we can accomplish. So let me shut up for a minute. I know it's late. Any questions that I can answer, I'd be more than happy to answer. It's a lot to take in, I realize. I will tell you this, throw up a hand when you're ready. I'll stop and I'll just, yes, sir.
The tipping point is very powerful. And I see that you're taking action this fall with the plan for the teaching, if you will. I'm wondering if you could give us some, suggestions of what we can do to help that tipping point go forward.
Number one, you're here in law school. So take your education with a critical eye. Challenge your teachers in a respectful way. Is this stuff being taught in this law school? Is this kind of analysis being done? And let's be clear, I'm not talking about critical race theory, which is actually a law school curriculum. But I think when you're talking about what people did and what people said about what they did, I think that's called history. So come to the Who We Are Project website. You will see all kinds of resources about other organizations that you can support. You'll see actions that we're going to try and take. And I think a lot of times when people say, what is it that I can do to be active? One of the things I want you to think about is, I can't tell you the 3 things you can do that'll make this all better. Doesn't work that way. We are in for a couple of decades at a minimum of a struggle here. And so this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. We have to be looking at the long game. And so there are organizations out here that are trying to do work in all these areas that touch on racial justice. Get involved with one of those organizations. Think about where you're going to spend your career as a lawyer. Think about the candidates who run for things, not just president and senator, but like district attorney and school board member. These are the kind of things that are going to make a difference. And so it is simply engagement at a community level with things that you haven't done before. There was a tragic shooting in my hometown last night. A kid just went crazy and was driving around the city shooting people. And it was a young activist. I think he can't be more than 25 years old. And he had the most intelligent thing to say. He said, before you start pointing fingers to blame anybody, look in the mirror and ask yourself and give an honest answer. What have I done in this community to prevent something like this from happening, to prevent the conditions that lead themselves to something like this happening? And if you can't come up with a couple of things, maybe it means it's time to take some steps that you haven't taken before. Yes, sir.
I assume this answers on your website, but how is this film being distributed? How can we spread the word about it?
Thank you very much. The film was released in January. Sony Pictures Classics distributed the film, and they have done an incredible job of working with us. They did everything they said they would do. So we were in 350 theaters from January all through the month of February. It then went to, and now I'm getting into language that I don't really like, I'm going to use the wrong words, but there's like on demand and this and that. It's now on Netflix. And if you go to our website, there is a company called Roku that Sony Pictures Classics hired to specifically market the film to groups like this at a law school, to high schools, to different community groups. So come to our website and we can direct you to places where you can see the film or where you can have other people see it. But we understand that we'll be playing on Netflix for at least another 12 months. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm a theology graduate student, and you mentioned in the film that your parents were Catholic converts and Catholic school. And without knowing, or asking you to share how religion has continued to be a part of your life, I wonder if you see the church as having a specific role in doing anti-racist work, and as a person who will probably be involved with the church for a while, what we can do to do that work.
Thank you for that question. And I think the church does have a role without question. What I will say is this: the reason I ended up at St. Louis School was because a priest came to our house in 1962 and knocked on the door and said, "Hi, I'm Father Clunan at St. Louis School, which is 1 mile from where you live. Your kids are going to the all-Black Catholic school down on the Mississippi River, and that's like 8 miles from where you live. You live in my district. I want you to come to my school." This is a guy who grew up in Mississippi and northern Tennessee. I have no idea why he took that initiative to support us to come to his school. What I can say to you is, in Memphis in the 60s, I tell people, like, I didn't read about the civil rights movement in a book. I grew up in the middle of it. It's what was happening when I walked out the door of my homes. And the people that were in the streets with us in Memphis were the Catholic priests and the Catholic nuns. They walked their talk in the South when it came to civil rights. I have other issues with the church, but on that issue, they walked their talk. And the church does have a role going forward, that same kind of supportive role, and a role in reckoning with the church's involvement with enslavement. And the Catholic Church is one of the richest organizations in the world. And if they decide that they're going to do something about the history of enslavement, not only in this country, but in other countries around the world, there's a lot they could do. So yes, I think the church has a role, and I'm hoping that there are people like you who are going to be working with the church and in the church who can make sure that those voices are heard. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
That number of mass incarceration. I'm curious about the voices of the people who are behind bars. They've gotten educated in some instances. They've been able to organize a little bit. They have a story to tell. We often talk about humanizing people. So I'm just curious as to whether how that figures into your plan.
I have been going in and out of prisons since I was 25 years old, in the state of Washington, then in the state of California, and then in federal prisons around the country. And what you will find is that the difference between us and 95% of the people in prison is about that much. About that much. There, but for the grace of God go I, is a saying that I think does not get enough use in this area. So there are all kinds of organizations that are working with incarcerated people and formerly incarcerated people. And those are organizations that the Who We Are Project is working with as well. What I'm trying to do with the Who We Are Project is to make sure I don't want to do something that somebody else is already doing. I want to support them. If there's a group that's already working in an area, then I want to uplift that group and support their work. What I saw, and the reason I left the ACLU, is that this history was just not getting play. There's the 1619 project, which is brilliant, but there is so much of this that is more than one person or one organization can do. So what the Who We Are project is going to try and do is to focus on telling our history and connecting our history to the present day, so that we can say, if there's a solution we're looking for to this problem, we need to go back 150 years and understand everything that went into creating this problem. If you don't understand what created the problem, by definition, you will never solve it, because all your solutions will be going toward things that didn't start the problem. It's actually incredibly simple. And that's what's so scary about it. Last thing I'll say, if I don't see any other hands, editing this film was Emily Kunstler. This is like a real movie, and that's because of Emily Kunstler. The job she did editing this film was unbelievable. There are things that you didn't see in this film. You didn't see the interview of the pastor of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where the bombing occurred in 1964. You didn't see the interview of the pastor of Mother Emanuel Church, where Dylan Roof slayed 9 people and injured a whole bunch of others. So there are all kinds of people that we interviewed that we couldn't put into this movie just because of a time frame. These are things that the Who We Are project will be working on and releasing as we go forward. The other 2 things I will tell you is, at the bridge in Selma, I think that was one of the most difficult interviews for me in this entire work, because Hank Sanders is a frickin' legend. And so is Faye Toure, just legends. They both went to Harvard Law School and went right back to rural Alabama and have worked there their entire lives. We thought that that interview was not going to make the movie, because there is a stoplight at the bottom of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and people saw 3 Black people with cameras on them, and so they could figure something's going on, and people laid on their horns at every stoplight. So we thought, we're not going to be able to use this interview because we're not going to get the sound. And the sound editors did an incredible job. I don't think you heard one horn. I've been listening every time I've seen it. I haven't heard one horn. The sound editors just edited it out, and and it was remarkable. The last interview we did was in March of 2020, and that was with Mother Randall, who is still alive and is 107 years old. We went to Tulsa twice, once at the end of 2019 and once at the beginning of 2020, before the pandemic. We spent probably 3 weeks there, and we didn't get to talk to Mother Randall because, and it was right that we didn't get to talk to her right away, because the activists in Tulsa needed to know who we were and what is it that you're doing. And that's why when we would go to cities to try and film, we would get there on a Wednesday or a Thursday. We would give this 3-hour talk, and then we would meet with people and tell them this is what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. And they called us in March and said, hey, Mother Randall's feeling really good, and we've got one day where we think it may work. And we literally visqueened her house, because I'm like, we are not giving this woman COVID. And she was remarkable. She had a good day. And, when you're 107 years old, there are good days and bad days. And her memory was remarkable. And I don't know that it came through to y'all, but when she was describing seeing bodies that she thought were sleeping, and she thought, people aren't supposed to sleep in the street. And then she said, the adults told her what was happening. And that took a couple of days to get over that interview. I think that woman is just remarkable. And she is one of the plaintiffs in the civil lawsuit against the city of Tulsa, the Tulsa Police Department, and a number of companies that's still going on in Tulsa right now.
Well, I want to stop there and say, Jeff, we think you are remarkable too. An activist, a lawyer, a documentarian, and an amazing teacher. And thank you for being here. Thanks for being our
Hey,
Rappaport.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll be here. I'm teaching a class on Wednesdays, and Wednesdays is a day where I'm gonna try and be on campus for most of the day. So I'm over in the building with a red door.
Barrett House.
Barrett House.
There will be many other opportunities to hear Jeff speak, including a program on Tuesday on peremptory challenges. And the following Wednesday, the 21st, where Jeff is going to do another talk that we're calling his community address. So please join me in thanking him.
Thank you, folks. Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all coming, and good night.